1,000 candles blazed in the mirrored ballroom, scattering golden light across silk and crystal. But Eliza Trentham felt as if she stood in a cage. The music swelled, violins tumbling over one another in a desperate race, yet her heart beat faster still, not from delight, but from dread. Her mother's gloved hand tightened on her arm, urging her forward into the swirl of taffeta and titled names. Eliza, you must smile. Not like that, graciously, dear. Remember what is at stake. Lady Trentham hissed beneath her breath, the words muffled behind a fixed, brittle smile. Eliza's own smile was sharper, laced with the irony she wielded like a shield. I am certain the gentleman shall be blinded by my radiance, Mamma, and not notice the fraying lace at my cuffs. Hush, Lady Trentham replied, her voice trembling on the edge of hope and humiliation. The Duchess of Ravenshire's annual charity ball was not merely a social event. It was a marketplace, and Eliza, despite her pride, knew herself one of its wares. Her family's fortunes had unraveled thread by thread since her father's death, leaving her and her mother perched precariously on the edge of respectability. Every introduction, every dance was a transaction measured in smiles and whispered speculation. As she drifted through the throng, Eliza's gaze flicked over the room. She saw the gleam of envy in some eyes, the calculation in others. But it was the sudden hush that drew her attention. Heads turned. The music seemed to pause mid-note. The Duke of Alresford had arrived. He stood at the threshold, broad-shouldered and unsmiling, his presence somehow both commanding and solitary. His dark hair was touched with the faintest silver at the temples, but his eyes, grey as winter mist, missed nothing. Rumor clung to him like a second skin, the fortune, the scandal, the years spent abroad. Some said he had a heart of stone, others that he sought redemption or perhaps merely distraction. Lady Trentham's hand fluttered to her throat. There he is, she breathed. The Duke himself. Oh, Eliza. But Eliza's reply was lost as they were swept forward in the tide of introductions. Her mind rebelled at the thought of being offered up, another hopeful debutante. Still, when the Duchess herself beckoned, they could not refuse. Miss Trentham, may I present His Grace, the Duke of Alresford? The Duchess's smile was practiced, her eyes shrewd. Eliza curtsied, her chin held high. Your Grace, she said, her tone cool but polite. Alresford's gaze lingered on her, as though weighing her in some silent balance. Miss Trentham, he replied, his voice low and edged with amusement. I trust you are enjoying the ball. She met his gaze, unflinching. Immensely, Your Grace. There is no finer entertainment than observing the subtle art of matchmaking in all its varieties. His lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. You find it amusing to be the subject of such observation? I find it illuminating, she said, with a tilt of her head. One learns much when one is not expected to speak. He regarded her for a moment, then inclined his head. Perhaps you should speak more often, Miss Trentham. It is rare to encounter honesty in such a setting. The Duchess gave a brittle laugh, but Eliza could sense the tension in Alresford's stance. He was not used to being challenged, nor she suspected being amused by it. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden wail of a child. A little girl, no more than 6, stood in the doorway, her face blotched with tears. The guests recoiled, startled by the intrusion of something so raw and unvarnished. Before anyone could react, Alresford crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to one knee before the girl. His voice was gentle, stripped of all formality. Are you lost, little one? The child nodded, hiccuping. I cannot find my mamma. He took her hand, his large gloved fingers engulfing hers. We shall find her together. There is nothing to fear. Eliza watched, caught off guard by the tenderness in his tone, the care with which he guided the child back into the crowd. He did not glance back at the assembly, nor did he seem aware of the stares that followed him. When he returned, the ballroom had resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted in Eliza. She saw, for a fleeting moment, the man beneath the title, a man capable of kindness, and perhaps of hurt. As the night pressed on, Eliza found her thoughts returning to the Duke, to the clash of their words and the glimpse of vulnerability he had not meant to show. The dance was only beginning, and already she sensed the danger and the promise of stepping further in. She did not see the Duke watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable, as the next waltz began. Rain battered the Trentham townhouse, drumming against the windows with unrelenting insistence as Eliza stood before the mirror, her mother's sharp voice ricocheting through the corridor outside. Even as she adjusted her gloves, Eliza's mind simmered with resentment. Every encounter since the Ravenshire ball had been calculated, a chess game in which he was both pawn and prize. Lady Trentham swept in, cheeks flushed with anticipation. "Eliza, the Duke has accepted our invitation to dinner. I trust you understand the importance." Eliza turned, her tone frosted with sarcasm. "Yes, Mamma. I am to charm him, regardless of my own inclinations." Lady Trentham pursed her lips, undeterred. "You will do your duty. This is not the time for stubbornness. Think of Clara. Think of your brother's future." The mention of her ailing sister stilled Eliza's tongue. Duty, always duty. She pressed her lips together and nodded, though her heart rebelled. By candlelight, the dinner unfolded with all the tense formality of a diplomatic summit. Charles Ashton, Duke of Alresford, sat opposite Eliza, his gaze steady and unreadable. The table shimmered with borrowed silver and the best porcelain, but the true battle was waged in words. "My lord," Lady Trentham began, her voice honeyed, "I believe you and my late husband shared an acquaintance in Parliament." Charles inclined his head. "We did. Lord Trentham was a man of conviction rare enough in those chambers." Nathaniel, Eliza's elder brother, offered a wry smile. "My father's convictions were sometimes costly." Charles's eyes flickered with understanding. "Principles often are." Eliza set down her fork. "Some would say principles are a luxury reserved for those who can afford them." He turned to her, grey eyes sharp. "And yet, Miss Trentham, it is those who cannot afford them who hold them most dearly." A silence fell. Lady Trentham hastily changed the subject, but the air between Eliza and the Duke crackled with something unspoken challenge, perhaps, or the first inkling of mutual respect. After dinner, as the guests retreated to the drawing-room, Eliza found herself beside Charles at the hearth. She could feel the weight of her mother's expectations pressing upon her, yet she could not suppress the urge to push against the boundaries set for her. "You do not care for these charades," he observed, voice low enough for her ears alone. Eliza's eyes flashed. "And you, your Grace? Are you not weary of being paraded as England's most eligible bachelor?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I find society's fascination with my private life both tedious and intrusive. Perhaps you should give them what they want, a grand romance, a happy ending. Then they would find some other subject to dissect." He met her gaze fully, and for an instant she glimpsed the exhaustion etched in his face, the burden of endless scrutiny. "There are some wounds that no romance can heal, Miss Trentham." She did not press him further, but the candor in his reply unsettled her. It was the first time she sensed, beneath his aloof exterior, a loneliness that mirrored her own. The next morning, whispers lingered in the parlors and markets of Mayfair. Some spoke of Eliza's lack of dowry, others of the Duke's disgrace, a broken engagement with a viscount's daughter, a duel fought in the grey light before dawn. Eliza heard the rumors as she moved through the city, each one a fresh barb. She held her head high, but the knowledge of her family's vulnerability gnawed at her. It was Nathaniel who brought the Duke to their modest estate on the city's edge, under the pretense of discussing land leases and investments. Eliza watched from the window as Charles dismounted, his coat darkened by the persistent drizzle. There was nothing ostentatious about him now, no retinue, no fanfare. Only a man braced against the English weather, his expression unreadable. He greeted Nathaniel with a firm handshake, then glanced up at the house, catching Eliza's eye for the briefest moment before she turned away. Her pulse quickened despite herself. In the cramped study, Nathaniel and Charles spoke in low tones about rents and harvest yields. Eliza busied herself with correspondence, determined not to hover like a hopeful debutante. Yet when a soft cry echoed from the hallway, her resolve melted. She excused herself and hurried toward the sound. In the nursery, she found Clara curled on her narrow bed, cheeks flushed with fever. Eliza knelt, brushing damp curls from her sister's brow. "There, darling, I'm here." Clara's voice was a whisper. "Will you read to me, Lisa?" Eliza reached for the battered book of fairy tales, and began to read, her voice gentle and rhythmic. She did not notice Charles standing in the doorway until the chapter ended. His presence was silent, his gaze softened by something she had not seen before. "You care for her yourself?" he asked quietly. Eliza nodded, smoothing the quilt. "There is no one else. We cannot afford a nurse." Charles stepped into the room, glancing at Clara, who offered him a shy smile. "She is fortunate to have you." Eliza looked up, surprised by the warmth in his tone. "We do what we must for those we love, Your Grace, even when the world would have us believe it beneath us." He seemed about to reply, but Nathaniel called for him, and he withdrew, leaving Eliza with her thoughts churning. Later, as the day waned, Eliza walked in the garden, the air thick with the promise of more rain. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Charles, his coat unbuttoned, his expression unusually open. "You are not what I expected," he said simply. Eliza arched a brow. "Is that disappointment or relief?" He smiled, a flicker of genuine amusement lighting his face. "I'm not certain yet. You are—" He hesitated, searching for the word. "Uncompromising." She considered him, weighing whether to trust. "I have learned it is safer to be so." A silence stretched between them, the only sound the wind in the hedges. Charles studied her, and Eliza, for the first time, saw the loneliness in his eyes, the mark of a man used to being admired, but rarely understood. "I have made mistakes, Miss Trentham," he said at last, his voice raw. "Some of them public, most of them costly." She wanted to ask about the rumors, the broken engagement, the duel whispered about in drawing rooms. But she saw in him the same ache she felt, the weight of others' expectations, the longing for something real. They stood together, not as adversaries, but as equals, both unwilling to admit how the other's presence unsettled their careful defenses. When Charles departed that evening, Eliza watched him go with a heart both lighter and more burdened. She told herself it was nothing, curiosity, perhaps, or pity. But as she returned to Clara's bedside, she could not silence the echo of his words, nor the hope, unbidden, that he might return. Charles, riding away from the Trentham estate, was equally troubled. He had come to conclude a simple business arrangement, but found himself thinking of Eliza's laugh, her stubborn chin, the gentleness in her touch. He had never met a woman who challenged him without guile, nor one whose strength so clearly masked her vulnerability. He tried to banish her from his mind, to remind himself of the dangers of hope. But her image lingered, stubborn as the rain. As night fell and the city's lamps flickered to life, both Eliza and Charles lay awake, haunted by new questions and by the memory of a meeting that had changed them both in ways neither dared confess. Neither could know what the next encounter would bring, or how much it would cost them both. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the parlor's lace curtains, gilding the assembled ladies in a haze of gold and shadow. The air in the Trentham drawing-room was thick with the scent of rosewater and the sharper, more acrid perfume of ambition. Eliza perched on the edge of a damask sofa, every muscle taut, while her mother fluttered about with brittle cheer, pouring tea for the Duchess of Ravenshire and Lady Fairchild, two of society's most formidable matrons. Lady Trentham's eyes begged for her daughter's compliance, but Eliza's pride, already smarting from the morning's humiliations, flared as she listened to the parade of polite malice disguised as conversation. "My dear Miss Trentham," simpered Lady Fairchild, fingers sparkling with rings as she accepted her cup. "It must be such a comfort, in difficult times, to retain one's well-bred manners. Not all young ladies manage so well when circumstances change." The Duchess added, "One must remember, of course, that a family name is a precious thing, even if fortunes have waned. I'm sure your dear mother is proud of how you carry on." The other ladies tittered behind their fans. Eliza's cheeks burned, but her smile never faltered. "Indeed," she replied, her tone edged with ice. "A family name is precious, though I confess I have yet to see a title prevent a scandal or pay a creditor's bill. Still, I suppose the comfort of a good name is preferable to the discomfort of a guilty conscience." A stunned silence followed. The teacups stilled mid-air. Lady Trentham's face paled, her lips forming a silent plea. Lady Fairchild's gaze narrowed, her voice honeyed but sharp. Such wit. One must hope it does not cost you dear in the end, Miss Trentham. Before Eliza could retort, a new presence entered the room. Charles Ashton, Duke of Alresford, strode in with unhurried authority, his eyes sweeping the gathering and settling, unblinking, on Eliza. "Ladies," he greeted, his voice calm but steely, "I could not help but overhear. Miss Trentham speaks with honesty, an admirable trait, far too rare in our circles. I, for one, appreciate candor far more than idle flattery." A ripple of shock ran through the room. The Duchess's lips parted in surprise. Lady Fairchild's gaze dropped to her lap. Charles's defense was unexpected, and it changed the current of the conversation at once. Lady Trentham, recovering her composure, hastened to pour the Duke a cup of tea. Eliza met his eyes, a flash of gratitude mingling with something sharper, a challenge perhaps, or the acknowledgement of an unexpected ally. That evening, rain lashed the city's rooftops. Charles sat before the fire in his club, a glass of brandy untouched at his elbow, his thoughts circling the events of the day. Lord Henry Vaughan, his oldest friend, lounged opposite, watching him with amused curiosity. "You have made yourself the champion of the Trentham girl," Henry drawled, swirling his brandy. "Half the ladies in Mayfair are scandalized." Charles's lips twisted in a wry smile. "Half the ladies in Mayfair are scandalized by the color of my cravat. I care little for their opinions." Henry's expression sobered. "You care for Miss Trentham, then?" A silence fell. Charles stared into the fire. "I do not know what I feel. She is different, unafraid. But I cannot trust what draws people to me, Henry. My wealth is a curse. Every word spoken to me is filtered through ambition or envy. I fear being loved for what I possess, not for who I am." Henry nodded. "You have been burned before." Charles's jaw tightened. "Yes, and I do not intend to be again." The next morning, Eliza walked with Lucy in the gardens behind the Trentham house. The air was sharp, and the leaves, still wet from the rain, glistened like glass. Lucy, ever the pragmatist, tucked her hand into Eliza's arm. "You must be careful, Liza," she whispered. "Men like Alresford, they can ruin a woman's reputation with a word. His past is not as clean as society pretends. You know what they say about the duel, the broken engagement. If you let him close, you risk everything." Eliza looked away, jaw set. "I have no intention of letting him close, nor do I wish to be paraded like a prize mare." Lucy squeezed her arm, concern in her eyes. "Even so, be wary. You have so much to lose." Eliza nodded, but her heart was tangled, pride and longing warring within her. That evening brought calamity. Nathaniel burst into the drawing room, face ashen, hands shaking. "Eliza, I need your help. He broke off, unable to meet her gaze. "I have lost more than I can pay at cards. They will come for me, Liza, for us." Lady Trentham gasped, sinking into a chair. Eliza's mind raced, the world spinning with dread. "How much?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel swallowed. "More than we have. I do not know what to do." Before the shock could settle, Charles arrived, summoned by urgent note. He listened to Nathaniel's confession, his face grave. "I can settle the debt," Charles offered quietly. "It need not be spoken of again." A heavy silence fell. Eliza's fists clenched at her sides. "No," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "We will not be indebted. I will not have our family beholden to you, Your Grace. We may be desperate, but we are not beggars." Charles's eyes searched hers, something raw flickering in his expression. "Pride can be a dangerous thing, Miss Trentham. Sometimes it must be set aside for those we love." Eliza shook her head, her words trembling. "And sometimes pride is all we have left. I thank you for your offer, but I cannot accept." For a long moment, neither spoke. The walls between them, so carefully maintained, showed the first aching cracks. Charles's hand hovered at his side, as if wishing to reach for her, but he let it fall. "Very well, but know that my offer stands should you change your mind." He took his leave, and the room seemed colder for his absence. Nathaniel buried his face in his hands. Lady Trentham sobbed quietly. Eliza stood motionless, pride and fear warring within her. That night, as the city slumbered under a shroud of rain, Eliza lay awake, the Duke's words echoing in her mind. In another part of London, Charles gazed out into the darkness, longing and regret entwined in his chest. Neither could sleep, and neither knew how much more would be demanded of their hearts before the night's end. The scent of rain lingered in the air as the carriages swept up the gravel drive of Ravenshire Hall. The country estate shimmered in early autumn's gold, its sprawling lawns and ancient oaks promising escape from London's relentless scrutiny. But for Eliza, the promise felt like a warning. She alighted with measured grace, her gaze flickering over the assembled guests, lords and ladies in their hunting tweeds, laughter a little too bright, glances a little too sharp. Lady Trentham hovered at her side, nerves coiled beneath her smile. "Remember, Eliza, we are guests here. There can be no missteps. The Duchess's invitation is a privilege, not a right. Mind your tongue." Eliza pressed her lips together, resisting the urge to retort. Already she felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. She caught sight of Charles Ashton, Duke of Alresford, standing apart from the crowd beneath a yew tree, his posture relaxed yet alert, eyes scanning the arrivals with habitual wariness. A pulse of something worry, anticipation fluttered in her chest. Inside, the drawing-room gleamed with polished wood and the glow of 100 candles. Lady Trentham made introductions, her voice brittle with pride and desperation. But Eliza's attention was drawn repeatedly to the Duke. He was courteous but distant, exchanging pleasantries with the Duchess and Lord Beresford, his formidable uncle, yet always his gaze found Eliza's. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Ravenshire's famed hunting party was assembled on the terrace, riders and grooms, sleek horses stamping in the mist, dogs yapping in anticipation. The Duchess, resplendent in deep green velvet, surveyed her guests and smiled. "Miss Trentham, I believe you ride?" she inquired, her tone arch. Eliza nodded, chin lifted. "I do, Your Grace." "Excellent. The Duke of Alresford will serve as your partner. I trust you will keep him in check." Laughter rippled among the guests, but there was curiosity, too. Eliza sensed it like a prickle at the nape of her neck. Charles approached, his eyes bright with challenge. "Shall we, Miss Trentham?" She met him with a steady look. "If you can keep up, Your Grace." They mounted their horses. Eliza's a spirited bay, the Duke's a massive black gelding, and joined the line as it wound through the parkland. The early sun slanted through the trees, dappling the grass with shifting shadows. Eliza felt the old thrill of freedom, the wind tugging at her hair, the horse surging beneath her. As the hunt began in earnest, she urged her bay forward, deftly navigating fences and muddy tracks. Charles kept pace, matching her stride for stride. At a fallen tree, Eliza leaned low, clearing the obstacle with a grace that drew murmurs of admiration. She caught Charles's eye. He was grinning, unguarded. "You ride as if you were born to it," he called over the thunder of hooves. "My father taught me. He said a woman's courage matters more than her seat." Charles's laughter rang out, warm and genuine. "Then your father was a wise man." They rode on, weaving through thickets and brambles, competition softening into camaraderie. When the hounds lost the scent and the others veered toward a distant copse, Charles and Eliza found themselves alone at the edge of a weathered stone wall. A sudden rumble of thunder split the sky. The air changed, sharp, electric. Rain began to fall in torrents, drenching them in moments. There, Eliza pointed toward a crumbling chapel half hidden in a copse of oaks. "We can shelter there." They urged their horses forward, dismounted beneath the ancient portico, and darted inside just as lightning forked across the sky. The chapel, abandoned and cold, echoed with the storm's fury. Light slanted through stained glass, painting the flagstones in fractured color. Eliza shook rain from her hair, laughter bubbling up despite herself. "Well, Your Grace, it seems we are at the mercy of the elements." Charles's smile faded as he looked at her, truly looked, with no audience to perform for, no mask of courtesy to wear. "I find I do not mind the company." For a moment they stood in silence, listening to the rain hammer the roof. It was strangely intimate, this refuge from the world. Eliza walked to the altar, trailing her fingers over the worn stone. "My father used to bring us to the country every summer. He said the city was no place to remember what mattered." Her voice trembled, memory catching at the edges. "When he died, everything changed. The house, my mother, even the air. Sometimes I think I would give anything just to hear his voice again. Charles moved closer, his own features shadowed by the colored light. I understand. I lost someone too. My fiancée, Eleanor, He hesitated, pain flickering in his eyes. She broke our engagement, and I made mistakes. There was a duel. I nearly lost everything. My name, my place, my faith in people. Since then, I have found it easier to be alone. Eliza searched his face, seeing for the first time not the Duke, but the man wounded, uncertain, longing for absolution. It is a terrible thing, to be left behind. He nodded, voice raw. It is. The storm raged outside, but inside the chapel, time seemed suspended. Eliza reached for his hand, her fingers trembling, and he took it gently in his own. "Why do you let the world's judgment matter?" she whispered. He looked at her, vulnerability laid bare. "Because I'm tired of being alone. But I do not know how to be anything else." Eliza's breath caught. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. She wanted him to, more than she could admit. But the moment shattered as the storm began to abate. They withdrew their hands, both suddenly aware of the impropriety, the danger of what had nearly passed between them. "We should return," Eliza said softly. "Yes, before the search parties are dispatched," Charles replied, forcing a smile. They remounted in silence and rode back to Ravenshire Hall. The world already changed, and yet unchanged. As they approached the house, Eliza saw faces pressed to the windows, whispers following them through the corridors, rumors beginning their inexorable spread. That evening, the drawing room buzzed with speculation. Eliza bore the scrutiny with head high, but Lady Trentham was white with fear and fury. "Do you realize what you have done?" she hissed as soon as they were alone. "To be alone with a man unmarried, unchaperoned. The tongues will wag for weeks. You risked everything for a moment's foolishness." Eliza's pride flared, though guilt gnawed at her. "I sought only shelter from the storm, Mama. Would you have had me drown in a field for the sake of propriety?" Lady Trentham's voice shook. "You think you are clever, but you do not understand. We cannot afford scandal, not now. If he does not offer for you, we may be ruined." Eliza turned away, swallowing her anger and shame. "I will not force a man's hand for the sake of gossip." Lady Trentham's response was a strangled sob. "You may not have the choice." Elsewhere in the house, Charles stood before the fire in the library, his wet coat steaming when Lord Beresford entered without knocking. "So, nephew, I hear you have been playing the hero with Miss Trentham." Charles stiffened, jaw tight. "We were caught in the storm." His uncle's eyes narrowed. "So you say. But the world will see what it chooses. I remind you, your duty is to your title and your estate, not to a woman with neither fortune nor connections. The Trenthams are clinging to respectability by their fingernails. You cannot afford entanglement." Charles stared into the flames, anger simmering beneath the surface. "I know my duty, uncle." "Do you?" Lord Beresford's tone was icy. "Your father nearly lost everything for the sake of sentiment. Do not repeat his folly. Marry wisely. Marry well. Or do not marry at all." The door shut, leaving Charles alone with his thoughts, rage, longing, and a sense of suffocation. For the remainder of the house party, Eliza and Charles avoided one another with studied care. When they met in the hall, their words were clipped, their glances fleeting. Yet beneath the polite facade, the memory of the chapel pulsed between them, raw, unspoken, dangerous. Lucy found Eliza in the rose garden one morning, her expression grave. "It has begun," the whispers. "They say you and the Duke were alone for over an hour. Some claim you were seen holding hands." Eliza's cheeks burned. "Let them say what they will. I did nothing to be ashamed of." Lucy squeezed her arm, eyes bright with worry. "But will society believe you?" Meanwhile, Charles brooded in the library, haunted by the memory of Eliza's hand in his, her voice threading through the silence. He wanted to see her, to speak honestly as they had in the chapel. But the weight of duty and expectation bore down on him. That night, as the guests danced in the great hall, Eliza stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Charles across the room. Their eyes met just once, and in that moment, she saw mirrored in his gaze the ache she felt in her own chest. Neither moved, neither spoke, but both knew that the storm between them had only just begun. And as the clock struck midnight, with secrets and longing swirling in the candlelit shadows, neither Eliza nor Charles could guess what price the next dawn would demand. The first sign was the invitations, or rather, the lack of them. Where once the Trentham household had received a steady stream of cream-colored envelopes, now days passed in silence. Footmen brought only bills and notices. Lady Trentham paced the parlor, wringing her hands over the accounts. Eliza watched the decline unfold as if in a nightmare, each social slight a fresh humiliation. News of Nathaniel's deaths had seeped through Mayfair like ink in water. The whispers grew bolder. The Trenthams were finished, living on borrowed time and credit, their legacy crumbling. Shopkeepers pressed for payment. Creditors called at the door. Lady Trentham's smiles grew brittle, her voice strained from endless, fruitless appeals to old friends. For Eliza, the shame was suffocating. She avoided familiar faces on Bond Street, eyes fixed on the pavement, pride warring with despair. Clara's fever had returned, and even Lucy's loyalty could not shield Eliza from the knowledge that their prospects had dwindled to nothing. It was in this desperation that Mr. Hawthorne appeared, a man of new money and blunt ambition, whose fortune had been built on coal and railways. He was vulgar and loud, with a laugh that echoed too long and a manner that brooked no contradiction. But he was rich, and he made no secret of his intentions. "I'm prepared to offer for your daughter, Lady Trentham," he announced one afternoon, his boots muddying the Trentham carpet. "She will want for nothing. I can clear your son's debts and restore your household. I expect an answer within the week." Lady Trentham wept with relief after he left, clasping Eliza's hands. "This is our salvation, darling. You may not love him, but he can save us all. Your father would understand." Eliza's heart twisted. "Would he, Mama, or would he despise me for selling myself to the highest bidder?" "We have no choice," Lady Trentham cried. "Nathaniel, Clara, think of them." Eliza nodded, numb. That night, she lay awake, staring at the cracked plaster overhead, the weight of sacrifice pressing down. Was this to be her fate, traded for security? Her pride swallowed for her family's survival? It was Charles's jealousy that betrayed him. Word of Hawthorne's proposal reached him through the endless, unkind web of London gossip. The thought of Eliza, her quick wit and fierce pride, shackled to a man like Hawthorne, sent a cold fury through him. He confronted her in the garden one grey morning, his expression thunderous. "Is it true? Are you to marry Hawthorne?" Eliza met his gaze, chin high. "What does it matter to you, Your Grace?" He took a step closer, voice strained. "He is beneath you, Eliza. You cannot mean to throw yourself away." "And what would you have me do?" she shot back, eyes blazing. "Starve with dignity? Watch my brother dragged to prison? My sister grow weaker for lack of medicine?" Charles's hands curled into fists. "Let me help you. Let me." She laughed, the sound brittle. "Of course. You would swoop in and rescue me as if I were some consolation prize. Is that it, Your Grace? Is that all I am to you?" He flinched, color rising in his cheeks. "You know that is not true." "Do I?" Her voice trembled with the force of her emotion. "Or do you simply enjoy having something you cannot possess?" A charged silence fell. Charles's jaw tightened, words hovering unsaid. At last he turned and strode away, his pride as wounded as hers. Despite the quarrel, Charles refused to retreat. He arrived at the Trentham house with formal flowers and a request to see Eliza. He spoke with the decorum society demanded, asking for walks and conversation, seeking her opinion on books and music. But each meeting was fraught, her laughter a little too sharp, his compliments a little too stilted. They circled each other warily, longing and resentment flickering in every glance. One afternoon, as they strolled beneath the stripped branches of the garden, Charles reached for honesty. "Eliza, I do not pity you. I admire you. I wish you would let me." "Let you what?" she interrupted, voice flat. Solve all my problems? Make me respectable again. I will not be pitied, Charles. I cannot bear it. He stopped, frustration breaking through his practiced calm. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And you are the most arrogant man. We are well matched, aren't we? A moment passed. Then Charles bowed stiffly and excused himself, the formality between them now a shield as much as a barrier. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's situation worsened. The creditor's patience was at an end. Rumors of debtor's prison grew louder. Eliza found him in the study, head in his hands. I have failed you all, he whispered. If you marry Hawthorne, it will save us. I do not deserve your sacrifice, but I am too weak to refuse it. Eliza's throat ached with unshed tears. You are my brother. I would do anything to keep you safe. But as the week drew to a close, her resolve faltered. She could not bear the thought of a life bound to Mr. Hawthorne's braying laughter and calloused hands. Nor could she face the possibility of losing Nathaniel, or of watching Clara's illness worsen for want of a doctor's care. Lady Trentham hovered, desperate. It is not too late, Eliza. Hawthorne awaits your answer. Eliza turned away from the window, a decision forming in the storm of her heart. She would have to choose between her own desires and the duty that had defined her life. And somewhere in the gathering dusk, Charles stood alone, torn by a longing he could neither name nor master, wondering if pride would cost them both the happiness they might yet find. The next dawn would bring consequences neither could foresee. The ballroom at Lady Southwell's house glittered like a jeweled box, every inch ablaze with candlelight and the shimmer of silk and diamonds. The orchestra's waltz floated over the sea of guests, but beneath the gilded surface, currents of tension swirled as surely as the dancers spun across the polished floor. Eliza stood at the edge of the throng, her heart thudding in her chest. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, as in that moment, draped in borrowed satin, her family's ruin the silent shadow at her back. Lady Trentham hovered, her gaze darting from one powerful matron to the next. Stand tall, Eliza. This is our last chance to prove we still belong. Eliza straightened her spine, forcing a brittle smile. Every glance in her direction seemed sharper, every whispered word louder. She could feel Hawthorne's presence before she saw him, his laughter booming, his movements brusque as he shouldered through the crowd. He approached, face flushed with drink, eyes alight with a mean-spirited glee. My dear Miss Trentham, he called too loudly, drawing attention from the nearest guests. A word, if you please. Eliza's pulse quickened. She glanced at her mother, but Lady Trentham's face was stricken, her lips parted in silent dread. Hawthorne offered his arm with mock courtesy. Walk with me, I insist. With no graceful way to refuse, Eliza allowed herself to be led a few steps away, though not out of earshot. Hawthorne's grip tightened as he leaned in, voice pitched to carry. I must congratulate you, Miss Trentham. It takes a clever woman to play two men at once. Some would call it ambition, others, well, something less polite. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Eliza's cheeks blazed with humiliation. Do you imagine yourself a duchess already? Hawthorne sneered. Or are you simply biding your time until Ashton tires of you? Tell me, which is more lucrative, his fortune or mine? Eliza stiffened, her pride warring with tears. Release me, sir, she said, her voice trembling but clear. You forget yourself. He grinned, relishing her discomfort. Or perhaps you forget your place. A hush fell as Charles Ashton appeared, his eyes cold with fury. He stepped between them, his voice low and dangerous. That will be quite enough, Hawthorne. Hawthorne straightened, blustering. I merely speak the truth. All of London knows what she is after. Charles's tone cut like ice. If you speak another word, you will answer to me. Apologize to Miss Trentham. Now. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, with a muttered curse, Hawthorne turned on his heel and stalked away, leaving Eliza at the center of 100 staring eyes. A wave of humiliation crashed over her. She saw Lady Southwell's mouth twist in distaste, saw Lucy's face pale with shock. Charles reached for her, But Eliza shook her head and fled, skirts whispering over marble, out through the French doors into the moonlit garden. She stumbled down the gravel path, the night air sharp against her burning cheeks. The garden was silvered and silent, the shadows deep beneath the clipped yews. She pressed her hands to her face, willing herself not to cry. Footsteps followed, quick and purposeful. Charles's voice was soft but urgent. "Eliza, wait, please." She spun to face him, her composure shattered. "Why did you follow me? Have I not been humiliated enough for one evening?" He stopped a few paces away, his expression raw. "I could not let him speak to you that way. You did not deserve it." She laughed bitterly. "Deserve? What do I deserve, Charles? To be pitied, to be rescued, paraded about like a wounded bird?" "I'm so tired of being everyone's burden." He took a step closer, pain and longing mingling in his voice. "You are not a burden. You are the only person who has ever—" He broke off, fists clenched at his sides. "When I look at you, I see someone who will not be bought or cowed, someone who fights for what she loves." She shook her head, tears threatening. "I am afraid, Charles, afraid of losing myself, afraid that if I say yes to you or to anyone, I will disappear, that I will become what everyone expects, a wife, a dutiful daughter, a pawn to be moved about the board." Charles's voice was hoarse. "Is that what you think I want? Convenience, a prize to display?" She looked away, words tumbling out. "I do not know. Sometimes I think you want to save me because it is easy, because you can. I do not want to be chosen out of pity or because I am convenient. I want," she faltered, voice breaking, "I want to be seen for who I am. Not what I can offer or what you can give me." He stepped forward, closing the last distance, his voice shaking. "You are the only person who has ever truly seen me. Not the Duke, not the fortune, not the scandal. Just Charles. With you, I do not have to pretend." The truth hung between them, fragile and terrifying. Eliza's breath caught. "Then why does it hurt so much to be near you?" He reached for her hand, tentative. "Because we are both afraid. Because we want something real, and neither of us knows how to ask for it." She let him hold her hand, the warmth of his touch grounding her, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them alone, honest, exposed. But before either could speak again, the garden door banged open. Lucy rushed down the path, her face ashen. "Eliza," she cried, "you must come at once. It is Nathaniel. He has been arrested. They have taken him to the debtor's prison." The world seemed to tilt. Eliza stared at her friend, shock and dread warring in her heart. Charles's hand tightened around hers. "Go," he said softly. "I will help you, whatever it takes." Eliza nodded, her resolve stealing as she turned toward the house, the future more uncertain than ever, but no longer hers alone to bear. And as the distant bells struck midnight, a new test awaited them, one that would demand everything they had to give. The morning after Nathaniel's arrest dawned gray and cold, the city shrouded in a mist that seemed to seep through every crack in the Trentham house. Eliza had not slept. She sat at the window, hands clenched in her lap, watching carriages rattle past on the street below, as if the world were indifferent to her family's ruin. Downstairs, Lady Trentham wept in exhausted silence, and Clara's cough echoed through the thin walls, a reminder of all that was at stake. Lucy arrived at first light, her expression anxious. "You cannot let Nathaniel languish in prison, Eliza." "Something must be done." Eliza's voice was hollow. "What would you have me do?" "There is no money, no one left to ask. Mama has exhausted every favor." Lucy hesitated, then spoke softly. "There is one person who would help, if you would let him." Eliza stiffened. "You mean Charles?" Lucy nodded. "He cares for you. He would not see you suffer. Is your pride worth more than your brother's freedom?" Eliza turned away, tears stinging her eyes. She had sworn not to beg, not to become beholden to anyone, least of all the man who unsettled her heart. But Nathaniel's life hung in the balance, and duty pressed harder than pride. By noon she found herself standing before Charles's townhouse, heart hammering. The butler admitted her at once, and Charles appeared in the drawing room, his face grave with concern. Eliza. He moved toward her, stopping short when he saw her anguish. How is your brother? She swallowed hard. They have taken him to Newgate. The creditors say he will not be released until the debts are paid. Her voice broke. I have nowhere else to turn. Charles's expression softened. You did right to come to me. She met his gaze, wary. I cannot promise you anything, Charles. I will not sell myself for a favor. A flicker of pain crossed his face, but he nodded. That is not what I want. I will settle Nathaniel's debts every penny. But you owe me nothing. Not gratitude, not affection, not your hand. I do this because it is right, not because I expect a reward. For a moment, Eliza could not speak. The relief was dizzying, but so too was the knowledge that he wanted nothing from her but honesty. She blinked back tears, her pride and gratitude warring within. Thank you, she managed at last. I do not know how to repay you. Charles shook his head. There is nothing to repay. I want you to be free to choose your own happiness, even if it is not with me. Within a day, Nathaniel was released. The family's creditors were satisfied, and the worst of the scandal was averted. Lady Trentham wept with relief, her gratitude tempered by confusion and indignation. He could have asked for your hand, Eliza. Any man would. It is what I hoped for, what I expected. She pressed a trembling hand to her brow. Why would he help us, if not for you? Eliza could only shake her head, unable to explain the complicated tangle of feelings in her chest. Nathaniel, pale and shaken, thanked Charles in person. You have saved me, Your Grace. I do not deserve such kindness. Charles smiled faintly. Let us not speak of debts between gentlemen. Eliza watched the exchange, her heart aching with things unspoken. Afterward, Charles withdrew from society. His townhouse stood dark. Invitations went unanswered. London's rumour mill buzzed with speculation, but he appeared at no dinners, no balls, not even in his usual seat at the club. Eliza heard the whispers. Some said he had tired of the Trenthams. Others, that he had been rejected by a woman he loved. She told herself it was for the best. Yet his absence left a hollow ache she could not ignore. She wandered the house, restless, her thoughts circling back to the moment in the garden, the confession in his eyes, the gentleness of his touch. Was it pride that kept her from seeking him out, or fear of what she might find if she did? Lucy found her in the garden, staring at the withered rose bushes. He loves you, you know, Lucy said quietly. He has done everything you asked, expected nothing in return. Are you truly willing to lose him for the sake of your pride? Eliza's voice was tight. It is not just pride, Lucy. I do not know how to be anyone's responsibility. I'm afraid of losing myself. Lucy shook her head. Perhaps, but you will lose much more if you let this go. Happiness does not always come to those who deserve it. Sometimes you have to reach for it, even if it frightens you. Eliza looked away, the truth of her friend's words sinking deep. That evening, as dusk gathered, Eliza sat with Clara by the fire, her mind a tangle of hope and regret. Nathaniel, still weak from his ordeal, read quietly across the room. Lady Trentham dozed, her face at last peaceful. Eliza's heart twisted. She had clung to her principles, to the idea that love must be freely given, not bought or owed. But what if, in holding so tightly to her independence, she had shut out the one person who truly saw her? Upstairs in his silent study, Charles stared at the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. He had done what he thought was right, set her free, asked nothing. Yet the emptiness that followed was more profound than he had expected. He wondered if he had lost her forever. As midnight tolled, Eliza rose from her chair, her decision not yet made, but her resolve beginning to shift. Outside, a storm gathered on the horizon, one that would demand courage not just of pride, but of the heart. And as the first thunder rolled across the rooftops, both Eliza and Charles sensed that their story was not yet finished, and the hardest choices were still to come. The rumors grew like thorns, creeping through every parlor and shop in London, sharp and impossible to ignore. Eliza felt them wherever she walked, whispers that stilled as she entered, glances that slid away, invitations that never arrived. At first, she tried to hold her head high, but the lies Mr. Hawthorne spun were clever and cruel. They painted her as a schemer, a fortune hunter, a woman who had ruined her own chances and now sought to ruin others. Former friends crossed the street rather than greet her. Even the servants looked at her with wary pity. Lady Trentham, her nerves frayed to the point of breaking, wrung her hands and paced the drawing room. "You must go to him, Eliza. You must beg the Duke to marry you. It is the only way. Think of your sister, your reputation, all that we have lost." Eliza's jaw clenched. "I will not beg, Mamma. I will not force his hand for the sake of gossip. If Charles wishes to marry me, it must be his choice and mine." Her mother's eyes flashed with desperation. "You are too proud, too stubborn. See what it has brought us." Pride, perhaps, but also pain. Charles had not called, not written. Worse still, the papers now chronicled his every outing with Lady Emily Worthing, a woman whose family fortune and unblemished name made her the darling of the season. There were reports of rides in Hyde Park, laughter at soirees, and a whispered promise of a formal proposal. Eliza told herself it did not matter. But each headline, each glancing mention, was a fresh wound. She buried herself in work nursing Clara through her lingering illness, volunteering at the parish charity hospital, and distributing bread to the poor. In these tasks, she found purpose, if not peace. Clara, frail but cheerful, clung to her hand each night. "Do not be sad, Lisa," her sister whispered. "You are all I need." Those words helped Eliza endure the long days. She scrubbed floors, changed linens, and soothed fevers in the dim wards of the hospital, grateful for the anonymity charity work allowed. It was there, among the wounded and forgotten, that she felt most herself useful, necessary, far from the cruel judgments of society. For Charles, the weeks were a blur of obligations and unrest. He was seen with Lady Emily, as was expected of him, but every conversation felt like a performance. Lady Emily was everything his uncle wanted, beautiful, poised, and deferential. She smiled at his stories, agreed with his opinions, and never challenged him. With her, the world was easier predictable, safe. But in her company, Charles felt hollow, like an actor repeating lines written for someone else. He read the gossip columns, saw Eliza's name dragged through the mud, and clenched his fists in helpless rage. Yet he did not go to her. He told himself it was for her sake, to protect her from further scandal, to let her choose her own future. But the truth was more complicated, a tangled knot of pride, fear, and the heavy expectations of his rank. At night, he replayed their last encounter. Her eyes, bright with unshed tears, her voice, trembling with conviction. She had wanted to be seen, to be chosen for herself and not out of pity or obligation. Had he ever truly given her that? A late afternoon rain lashed the city as Eliza hurried through the slums with a basket of medicines and broth. The parish hospital was overflowing. Cholera had swept through the East End, and there were not enough hands to tend the sick. She had just finished bandaging a child's arm when she heard a familiar voice in the corridor. "Eliza?" She turned, heart lurching. Charles stood in the doorway, rain beading on his coat, his hair darkened and tousled. He looked tired, older somehow, and there was something like hope in his eyes. She straightened, wary. "Your Grace, I did not expect to see you here." He smiled, tentative. "Nor I you. Lady Southwell asked me to deliver supplies. Her son is ill. But I see you have everything well in hand." Eliza glanced away, busying herself with her work. "There is always more to do." A silence stretched, filled with the sounds of coughing and muted cries. Charles moved to help, rolling up his sleeves and taking a basin from her hands. Without another word, they worked side by side, washing wounds, soothing feverish children, speaking only when necessary. There was no audience, no pretense, just the rhythm of shared labor, the comfort of another's presence. After an hour, as dusk crept in, Charles paused beside her at the window. "You are remarkable, Eliza. No one here cares for titles or fortunes. only for kindness and courage. She shook her head, a tired smile curving her lips. I do what I can. It is not enough. He touched her arm gently. It is more than most. More than I have done most of my life. She searched his face, uncertainty and longing mingling in her chest. Why are you here, Charles? Is it duty or something else? He hesitated, the words coming slow and careful. I came for Lady Southwell's son, but I stayed for you. I have missed you, Eliza, more than I can say. Emotion threatened to choke her. And Lady Emily? He flinched, shame darkening his eyes. She is everything society wants for me, but she is not you. For a moment, the noise of the ward faded, and there was only the two of them, standing together in the twilight. I am afraid, Charles, Eliza whispered. Afraid of trusting, of being hurt again, of losing myself. He stepped closer, voice low and fervent. I do not want you to lose yourself. I want you as you are, brave, stubborn, impossible. No one else. She let herself believe him, just for a heartbeat. Then let us start again, not as duke and ruined lady, but as equals. He smiled, relief and longing flooding his face. As equals, Eliza, always. A cough broke the moment, and they returned to their work, side by side, hope flickering in the darkness. Outside, the storm eased, the city lights glowing brighter as night fell. But as Eliza and Charles faced the future, they knew that forgiveness of each other and of themselves would be the hardest gift of all. And somewhere in the city, a new rumor was already beginning, threatening to upend everything they had rebuilt. The Queen's Garden Party was the event of the season, an affair glittering with sunlight, diamonds, and the soft rustle of silk on manicured lawns. Eliza's heart pounded as she and her family approached Buckingham's gates. They were not alone in their nerves. Lady Trentham's lips barely moved as she whispered, "Hold your head high, darling. This is our last chance." The Trentham fortunes had not recovered, and the truth of their fall was stitched into every detail of Eliza's attire. A gown carefully let out, gloves mended beyond repair, a single heirloom pin at her throat. Yet her carriage was dignified, and her gaze steady as she entered the throng. She saw the way the crowd parted, more out of curiosity than welcome. Whispers bloomed in her wake, but she ignored them, focusing on Clara's trembling hand in hers. Nearby, Charles Ashton, Duke of Alresford, stood with a cluster of gentlemen, his presence as magnetic as ever. Lady Emily hovered at his elbow, luminous in white muslin, a single rose at her wrist. She leaned in, laughter like spun sugar, her eyes flicking often to Charles's face, searching for approval. Charles listened politely, but his smile was distant, his gaze scanning the assembly. Lady Emily pressed her advantage. Your Grace, I do hope you will join our party for the archery demonstration. Mamma so wishes to introduce you to the Duke of Sutherland. He bowed, but his eyes never softened. You are very kind, Lady Emily, but I have other business this afternoon. Surely nothing so pressing, she persisted, her tone sweet but edged with desperation. It would please the Queen herself to see you take your place among your peers. He turned at last, voice gentle but firm. Forgive me, Lady Emily. I cannot oblige you today. As he stepped away, the crowd's attention shifted. Eliza, standing with her family at the edge of the lawn, caught his eye. He moved toward her without hesitation, every step deliberate, every gesture watched by half the aristocracy. Eliza's heart hammered. Lady Trentham's breath caught audibly. Clara squeezed her hand, her eyes wide with hope. Charles paused before Eliza, bowing with formal grace. Miss Trentham, might I have a word? Eliza hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Of course, Your Grace. They moved away from the main gathering, under the shade of a blossoming chestnut. Conversation died around them. Every head turned. Lady Emily's cheeks blanched, her mother's fan snapping shut in irritation. Charles's voice was low, urgent. You must know why I'm here. I cannot leave you to the wolves any longer. I have tried to do what is right for you, for your family, for my name, but I am done with pretending. I do not want you as a consolation, Eliza, not for myself, nor for your wounded pride. I want you as my equal. She studied him, suspicion and hope warring in her eyes. And if I say I'm afraid, Charles, afraid of being swallowed by your world, of losing myself in your shadow? He reached for her hand, his grip warm, steady. You have never been in anyone's shadow, least of all mine. I am the one who fears, Eliza, fears that what I feel for you could be tainted by the world's expectations, by obligation or pity. I want a love that is neither bought nor owed. I want you with all your stubbornness and courage, not because you need me, but because you choose me. The word struck something deep within her. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting the truth settle. I have run from happiness for so long, I hardly know how to stop. Every time I reached for it, I thought I would lose myself. But the only thing I have lost is time. He leaned closer, voice trembling. Let us not lose any more. Let us decide for ourselves what our future will be. Not society, not your family, not even my own fears. Eliza opened her eyes, searching his face for any trace of doubt. She found only hope and vulnerability. Then let us begin again, Charles. Not as duke and ruined gentlewoman, but as two people who have earned the right to choose. He smiled, a real unguarded smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. On our terms, Eliza, always. Their hands remained entwined as the crowd began to murmur, the queen herself glancing their way. Eliza lifted her chin, pride and peace mingling at last. She would not be cowed, not even by the weight of royal scrutiny. Lady Trentham wept openly, joy and disbelief mingling on her face. Clara clapped her hands, and even Lady Emily, defeated at last, retreated with dignity. Eliza and Charles stood together, the world watching. But for the first time, it did not matter. Their union would be forged not by necessity, but by choice. A choice they would defend, side by side, against whatever storms might come. And as the sun dipped lower over the palace gardens, it was clear to all that the story of Eliza Trentham and the Duke of Alresford was far from finished. The last rays of afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the Alresford library, gilding the spines of old books and casting a soft glow over the two figures who stood in its quiet heart. Charles, hands trembling just enough for Eliza to notice, drew a breath deeper than any he had taken before battle, before Parliament, before any moment that had truly mattered. He reached for her hand, the weight of all they had endured suspended between them. Eliza, he began, his voice low but sure, I have asked you nothing you did not wish to give. But now, I would ask you this, not as a duke to a lady in need of rescue, but as a man who has finally learned what it means to be seen. Will you marry me? Not for duty or scandal or to quiet the world, but because you believe we might build something together, partnership, respect, and a love that is entirely our own. The silence that followed was full of sunlight and memories. Eliza searched his face, her pride unbent, her spirit unbroken. She thought of all the choices that had led her here, each sacrifice, each hard-won truth, each moment when she had refused to surrender herself to anyone's expectations but her own. She smiled, the edges of her mouth trembling with the force of her feeling. Yes, she said, steady and clear. Yes, I will marry you, Charles. Not as a rescue and not as a prize, but as your equal. I choose you. He pulled her into his arms, relief and joy written in every line of his body. There were tears in her eyes and laughter in his, and for a long moment the world beyond the library faded to nothing. The announcement of their engagement sent ripples through London society, some admiring, others scandalized. The gossips could not decide which was more shocking, that the Duke of Alresford had chosen a woman with no fortune and a ruined name, or that Eliza Trentham had accepted him on her own terms, her pride very much intact. At the wedding, whispers fluttered like moths among the guests. Lady Emily, radiant and composed, offered polite congratulations. The Duchess of Ravenshire, with a glint of mischief in her eyes, declared it the most romantic match of the decade. Some matrons sniffed at the bride's lack of dowry. Others marveled at her poise and the clarity with which she met every gaze. Charles, standing beside Eliza in the crowded church, felt the weight of the world's opinions, but cared for none of them. He saw only her courage, her wit, the stubborn lift of her chin. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, their eyes met, and everything else fell away. In the days that followed, the new Duchess of Alresford faced challenges with the same resolve that had carried her through scandal and hardship. She navigated the intricacies of the estate, managed household quarrels, and met the expectations of her title with a steady dignity that won over even the most skeptical of staff. Yet she refused to surrender herself to tradition. She continued her charity work, visited the hospital, and insisted upon hiring servants from the neighboring villages, giving preference to those in need. Society did not always know what to make of her. Some sneered, whispering that she would never truly belong. Others, especially young women, looked to her as a symbol of what could be possible, a marriage built on partnership, not convenience. Charles stood by her through every trial. When critics questioned her position, he silenced them with unyielding support. When the old guard doubted, he hosted dinners in her honor and praised her management of the estate. In private, he listened to her worries, shared his own, and found in her an anchor he had never known he needed. Nathaniel, inspired by his sister's courage, turned his own life around. He swore off gambling, worked honestly for the estate, and slowly rebuilt his reputation. Lady Trentham, who had once measured her daughter's worth in prospects and proposals, learned to respect the independence that had brought Eliza so much pain and, ultimately, so much happiness. One golden afternoon, as the last of summer's roses perfumed the gardens at Alresford, Eliza and Charles walked side by side along the winding paths. The estate stretched out before them, lush and full of promise. Clara's laughter echoed from a distant swing, and the sunlight caught on the river beyond the orchard. Eliza paused, her skirts brushing the soft grass. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing me, choosing this path." Charles smiled, drawing her hand through his arm. "Not for a moment. I have never known peace like this, nor hope. You are no one's consolation prize, Eliza. You are my partner, my equal, my heart." She leaned against him, content. "And you are mine. Whatever storms may come, we shall weather them together." As they walked on, the world might have whispered, but it no longer mattered. In the gardens of Alresford, their story was their own, one forged in adversity, honesty, and a love that belonged to neither society nor fortune, but to themselves alone.